Sensenina, 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 Sensenina. Namibia. It's called the ageless land. Some called it the land that God made in anger. Some called it the land of endless horizons. Some call it the land of the symphony of silence and clear skies. Imagine, inspire, and cultivate. Why tourism? I think people travel for pleasure or for business. It can also be a theoretical exercise of traveling around. It can be a business of attracting, accommodating, and entertaining tourists, as well as the business of operating tours. So it's people traveling to and staying in places outside of their normal residence for one day. So all of you here thus become tourists, except those that stays here. And I'm linking that to cultural tourism, which is the main focus of our talks here. And that's the movement of persons to cultural attractions away from their normal place of residence with the intention to gather new information and experiences to satisfy their inner or cultural needs. And these cultural needs can include the solidification of one's own cultural identity by observing the exotic other. I am because of you. I can only know myself through you and the differences between me and you. And therefore, it requires uniqueness, being the only one of its kind, unlike anything. All of you here in this room are unique. And that's what makes you you, because there is no other like you. Now, I start. That was just a prelude, a taste of what's coming. I want you to journey with me this afternoon through time and space. I'll be your guide on this journey through Africa. I hope what we'll encounter will change your mind, your spirit, and your heart. And I'll look at pre-colonial Africa in terms of creativity and tourism. What did tourists do at that time? And then I come to colonial Africa, creativity and tourism, what happened there? And then come to the time that we now have post-colonial Africa, creativity and tourism. And I'll conclude with what now, having gone through that journey. That's Africa before the arrival of tourists. We had kingdoms, we had queens, we had wealth, we had languages, we had forests, we had many things. And as a foundational statement or understanding of that Africa, the significance of physical artifacts can be interpreted against the backdrop of the socioeconomy, the political, the ethnic, religious, spiritual, and philosophical values of a particular group of people. And that Africa that you just saw had all of that. It had politics, it had ethics, spirituality, religion, and economies. And linked to that, there was ancient African philosophy, the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and our existence. And there was science, because they understand how to apply what they have learned from the laws of nature and technology. And that scientific understanding was to translate those imaginations into testable hypotheses. If I take a stone and I hit it onto something, there's a spark. If that spark hits a little bird's nest, there is fire. With that fire, I can create, by technology, translating scientific theory into practical action and thus molding objects into things that I can use for myself. So therefore, the philosopher's task is to reimagine our conception of the universe and our roles in life. What makes me me? Why do I do what I do? Why am I dressed like this? Where did I come from? Do I have ancestors? Or did I come out of a test tube? Did I come from a monkey? Or am I an alien? African art never existed in isolation from its people. And within Africa, tourism was always there. There was always constant movement, trade, and the exchange of ideas amongst those various kingdoms. Logically, African art is dynamic and has changed in form, function, and meaning over time as people, neighbors, kingdoms interacted with each other. Today, when people use the concept of indigenous art, they link it to the pre-colonial time and assume that it was static and unchanging, which is not true, because there were kingdoms that were based on science and technology. There is a group in Mali, the Dogon people, that understands planetary existence. And the same if you look at the pyramids in Giza and many others, we understood much more than what was apparent. Therefore, it must be argued that cultural values influence philosophies of some particular areas and people. There are two ways to preserve tradition, culture, and other related phenomena, and they are language and artifacts. Because there's an argument that Africa contributed nothing to civilization. The African gave the world fire, which is the energy that fuels civilization until today. They gave the world language, which is the means of communication and transferring ideas and knowledge. And we gave the world culture, the ability to cultivate ourselves, to cultivate nature, and to cultivate our relationship with the Supreme Being. Because for Africans, there are no atheists. In those kingdoms, there were no atheists. There was an understanding that there is a Supreme Being called many names. There is a proverb, I think, in Nigeria that says, you cannot teach a child about the Supreme Being. If there is such a proverb, it means that they understood already then that there is something more than us out there. Now, the link between language and culture. I am using the Anglo-Saxon way of making sounds for you to understand me. Nde andi vuru kupotsamela kajanye ndindama. Ich kann auch mit euch reden auf Deutsch, wenn es so sein soll. Of met jullie Afrikaans praat als het zo moet wees. It is not a measure of my intelligence. It is simply a way for me to transfer my knowledge and worldview to you. Weredu sees language or attributes to culture where culture is understood in at least two senses. Culture can be seen as language because your language contains all you have. It can be understood to mean the social norms and customary beliefs and practices of a human group, regardless whether you're European or African or Asian. Culture as a social norms and customary beliefs and practices depend on the existence of language, knowledge, communication, interactions, and methods of transmitting knowledge to the born and the unborn from the living dead being the ancestors, because they all live in the same continuum. Language, therefore, is seen as an essential and peculiar feature that distinguishes clearly human beings from other species of being in existence. Therefore, if the foreign tourists arrive and they found us talking to one another, and we learned their languages, yet they did not learn our languages, who is more human? Language and culture, if we must continue, human languages are diverse both in structure and function, and they change in time and through time. In my language, there is the way we call a cricket is okathanga matondo. It means it's a creature that kicks your balls. We've got a creature, when you sit around the fire, you call them sun spiders. In my language, we say, eambura hungi, which means it's that thing that makes you stand up from the fire and the discussion. Because when it comes by, you can be who you are, you must stand up. So we see and we describe what we see. A helicopter in my language is edagadaga. Oshima tashidigri. Edagadaga tashidigri. That is the beauty of language. And it does not have to do with the level of education one has. It must be borne in mind that expression of language could be either verbal or written or both. The African's written form is arts. That's our language. That's what we have left from our ancestors for us to pass on to the unborn, and to ourselves. Through sculptures, through song, through dance, chanting, poetry, rock art, and many more, even our clothing. And one cannot talk about arts without looking at the aesthetics. Aesthetics being the study of feelings, concepts, judgments arising from our appreciation of the arts or an object considered moving or beautiful or sublime. Moving means that it moves you from within. When I look at my women folk, I say, "Utanawaye tu." My women folks are our calves, the calves of my family. If you're not of my language, you would wonder, how can I say my women folks are calves? But for me, as an Ovambo, the cows are everything. They constitute how I value things. When you mark this right mark, ongobe, it's a cow. A wrong mark, a combo, it's a goat. That's how I understand. That's how I understand I passed or I did not pass. Now, can artwork be a vehicle of truth? Does artwork express the feelings of the artist and the community? Does artwork communicate feeling? And that was the problem, because when they took our art out of Africa, they thought it is just art. Picasso and a few others looked at this art and they said, how can it be? How can primitives come up with such living, feeling art? Because the artist must imbue his spirit within that work. Therefore, the significance of African arts becomes clear if you look at what are the criteria that must be met if something is to move you from within. The depth of feeling the artist has for the emotional content of his work, be it a song, be it a literary work, be it a sculpture. Her capacity to express it, the individual talent of the artist as manifested in giving it a balanced artistic unity, the whole effect as the result of coordination between content and expression of form. And from that criteria, African sculpture and African arts has the highest aesthetic validity. All works of art of high quality are the products of well-integrated culture of which the artist is a spokesman. So the artists are the spokesmen of our society, of what we are. The artist, by sensitivity and creative ability, is able to produce a synthesis of the ideas current in his community, ideas that constitute the structure of its sculpture, dance, song, poem, or literary work. And any high-level, well-integrated culture produces, first of it all, a political organization. The record of these political organizations becomes the history of that group. The people are then organized as the nation, Awambontu, who lives Moambo, Ahererontu, Akavangontu, Irmokavango. And so we can continue. The Zulu people in Zululand. And that they share a common cultural heritage, religion, spirituality, language, customs. And their unity is because the individuals have the same psychological pattern. It was mentioned before that our society today is suffering of depression. It is because we no longer share the same psychological pattern. The totality of all individuals, in this case a nation, creates sociological institutions which satisfy the psychological needs of that individual. Does our art today satisfy my needs, my psychological needs as an Ovambo, as a Namibian, as an African? Or does it satisfy the needs of another? The ancient African left the national imprint as well as the individual handmark of his genius on all selected pieces we have at hand. Now, therefore, arts functions as something in society, in that the objects of arts in that ancient civilization had the function of being used in initiation ceremonies, protective amulets, imenka, magical statues and other carved objects to be used in healing, small figurines that are used to divine. Today they use cards, tarot cards. And all these will be accompanied by music, drums, song, chanting, dancing, and language as the medium of communicating. I pause to talk about healing a little bit, because this is something that the African artist is not taking into account anymore. Healing involves music, song, rhythm, and dance. African healing typically includes a focusing of energy through movement, as in rhythmic, musical hand clapping, singing and dancing in some form or ceremonial, spiritual, communal context. Dance in Africa, as many other forms of behavior, is not an event in itself, but a connectedness with others and the external world. Through the rhythm of the dance energy, it's mobilized, motivation is sharpened, communal spirituality is stirred, and the ongoing spiral of life and health is amplified. During the migrant workers' times, in times of intensity and emotional charges, groups will dance and sing. During the liberation struggle, we ran through the streets singing. Imtombi kamchaila mambeli komba kanjan. None of you knows the song, and therefore there is no one responding to me. It's not from here. I started off with Sensenina, and immediately you guys responded. Because music and dance for us was not an individual thing. It's not for me, it's for you. When Africans start to sing, no one can stop them. They become an indestructible force. You can shoot us and kill us, but move, we shall move. Now, why is it, what contributed to that movement, to this ancient Africa? Why did they have this art? Because the organic role of an art in the life of each individual, it was part of your life. The great artistic talent, whether sculpture, etc., was part of that, and we have that inborn talent, be it rhythm, be it music, be it whatever, and the social organization which demanded the use of works of art and encouraged its production, because the art was used every day. It wasn't made for the rich people who should buy it. It was made for all of us. And the political organization of the great kingdoms, which on the official level recognized the numerous and indispensable uses of art and their shared uses. Our kings had their artists around them. Do our presidents have their artists around them? Do our governments recognize our artists? The artist became an important member of society, greatly honored and completely integrated within his group. Is that the same today? Thus the individual, the social order, and the political power all were united in the ideology expressed in the art. So we're moving on. We're leaving the ancient times, and we're coming to that terrible time in Africa, colonial Africa. And the Africa we saw with great kingdoms has become that. France, Great Britain, Belgium, Spain, Italy, Germany, Portugal, etc. And these foreign tourists arrive in search for new experiences. They brought their culture, language, and religion. They removed African spirituality and introduced religion and mentality. They moved us from being a community to individuals. They interpreted all they saw from their own worldview and perspective and made their reality our reality. They took the African artifacts as just artifacts without any deeper aesthetic and spiritual value and used that as the basis for their civilization. our song, our sculptures, our wealth, everything was taken. The impact of that is that today only an estimated 1% of the African art of those centuries has survived. During that time, each tribesman had several artifacts for his personal needs. Each tribe had hundreds of tribal uses. Each generation owned millions. Today, virtually all these artworks of 2,000 years have disappeared. Some survived, such as rock arts, and those objects kept in museums across the world, not in Africa. With that, the end of the African as he, she knew herself. Why was arts and creativity or creative expression suppressed? And that's the understanding that we must have of why we still today face this situation as artists. Those who seek to destroy progress, it is fundamentalist, imperialist, sexist, corrupt governments, white supremacists, militarists, greedy corporations have always discouraged arts and creative expression during human history. Why? The more robotic people are, the more the same people are, the more easily manipulated they are. Missionaries, therefore, demolished indigenous art. Patriarchal and organized religion destroyed matriarchal, the goddess belief, because we as Africans have been matrilineal. Today, we are patrilineal. The more you prevent creative expression, the more you prevent people from resisting change. African spirituality encourages creative expression, art, dance, ritual, sculpture, etc. Moving on. Now we are here. The winds of change are blowing across the African continent. The wind of change are blowing across the African continent. Oh! There we are. We're all smiling. Africa is independent. But there's a problem. Africa is no longer what it was. If you want to dance the Osaka or the Western drum, dance to it. If you want to dance to the Osaka or the African drum, dance to it. To dance to both drums at the same time does not benefit a human. That's a proverb from the Yoruba. And if I go back to that, you saw there was a house and there was a round house. The round house is Africa, the other house is the other drum. This house in which we are is from the other drum. The seats on which you are from the other drum. The tools I'm using are from the other drum. Nothing in this room represents my Africa. Except perhaps me. So the implications is that there's two worldviews living side by side. The one says culture is an impediment to progress. The other says, it is my country. It is my land. I have a right to be here. I have a right to speak my language. I have a right to eat my food. I have a right to speak to my ancestors if I so wish. The African language, spirituality, way of life, and the African himself today is perceived as inferior, as backward, and unable to develop in the modern world. The problem is that our ancestors are still with us, and they still want us to remain African, unless we ourselves give up. And the African artist can provide the answer and the way forward to this answer. and tourism can be a catalyst. What now? The primary instrument for African development must be a pan-African curriculum across all sectors, developed by Africans for Africans, funded by Africa. Only the African can understand his own reality. Only the African can tell his story as it is. Our story has been told by others for a long time, and today our youth believe the wrong story about who we are. We need a new discipline that links the arts at par with science, engineering, and technology if Africa is going to move with ethical development. That's my Africa today. In that Africa, tourism is everybody's business. But now, as artists, you must ask yourself, who are the customers? Africans or foreigners or aliens? Is there a demand for your unique products or experience? Are you unique? Is your work unique? Am I willing to pay for it? Am I getting value for my money? Who determines the value, you or me? If we quickly look at the Namibian artist, for this paper, I ran a quick survey so that it's not me speaking, but the survey speaking. The perceptions as mirrored by artists is that artists have a self-imposed, inflated walking ego, which takes away from their value. Artists have an attitude of, we need to provoke society. There is rampant insecurity in the art sector. There is not common understanding in the sector. And they are not relevant politically, socially, psychologically, and spiritually to the needs of Namibians or Africans. They lack business and entrepreneurial skills, knowledge and understanding of how to do business. And they serve a foreign audience. They dream foreign dreams. And so the lion shall catch them. My brother is giving me time, but I don't have a watch. Situations amongst artists, you don't work as one. You compete for resources. No one cares for the other. You don't ask the critical questions. There's a lot of proclamations. I am the best. Who says you are the best? There's a blaming mentality. You're waiting for someone to do something for them. Not much research being done. You must do the things yourself for yourself. No one is coming to save you. And history, heritage, arts, culture, education in Namibia, that's where the other problem is. It is much neglected and based on a different reality. Focus is on science and technology, but forgetting that science and technology comes out of our culture and arts. If I drink ombike, that's high science. Ombike is vodka, our own traditional vodka. There is no funding for me to continue doing my vodka and bring it to the table, so I must drink whiskey. There is no national policy in history, heritage, arts, and culture. So if you don't know where you are going, how are you going to know that you have arrived? Most ministry officials may not have practiced arts themselves. How can you then be there for the people you want to serve if you don't know what they do? Neglect of naturally gifted practitioners and a preference to academically trained practitioners. I ask, if I was busy fighting for independence with my AK-47, when was I supposed to get a degree? I know stuff. Recognize me as a member of certain, not only the ones who have a doctor, a professor. I am a traditional professor. I'm a traditional scientist, taught by my grandfather and my grandmother. Who are you So, moving on. There is hope. And the hope lies in the fact that your sector can take the uniqueness of Africa. It makes you different from all other continents. The resilience, because still today, despite the onslaught, African language prevails. African spirituality prevails. African medicine prevails. Human ingenuity. As a human, you are able to do everything abundantly above all you can think or imagine, if you're willing to dream. Competition is good. It asks of you to become better. Creative thinking. Are you thinking, or are you allowing others to think for yourself? If you have a mind and you're not using it, I'll use it for you. It's dynamic. And that dynamism allows you to innovate and to create something new, something extraordinary. Don't copy. Stop following South Africa, Nigeria. You can follow them, they are ours. But leave Europe, you are in Africa. Leave the West, you are in Africa. Use African examples. So, concluding, the local strength, there is so much locally that you can use for you to become a good artist, businessman or woman. The technological enablers are there. Don't just think internet. Think about African internet. It's also there. The power of place. This is your place. Those places, use them. The role of government. Who is the government? Who put those people in power? Who gave them power? Who was singing for them? Who did the creative designs for the political parties? Who wrote these things, the slogans? It's coming from you. You, the artist. When we were in the liberation struggle, Ndilimane kept us alive. Jackson Kawa kept us alive. They inspired us. What happened? Lucky Dube, Brenda Fassie, Jackson Kawa, Rashiama. What happened? Is that era gone? We have no new music, which is now to transform Africa. So that local strength is there. Technology is there. Inspiring entrepreneurs, they are there, but we don't bring them out because they are in the informal economy. Celebrate them. Power of place I've talked about, role of government. That's like the policies and all of that that you need to do. And, you know, cultural tourism. You know, if you take Kapana, that's Nyamachoma, for those who don't know. It's strips of meat the way we did it. We don't have T-bone steak and those things. We have that. We have matangara. We eat everything of the cow, even the intestines. You know, we eat the small baby fish, kapenda. Poikikos, du boys, mopana worms, yai, maheu, the various drinks. Now take that, bottle it, and the artists can brand it and come up with the designs to take it to the next level. Africa is waiting for you to take it to the next level. There's so much you can do. Be relevant to your society. You are an African after all. Focus on the needs of your customer. Be prepared to compromise. Be driven by needs. What do you need? What do your customer needs? And then, for us collectively, don't be afraid of failure. When you were a baby, you were falling, but today you are walking. Keep on. Just start. even if they laugh at you. Look for new approaches. Create a global network. One finger cannot remove a lice. Be prepared for hard work and tough time. To raise a cow is hard work. Then your ontungwa will be filled with ija. So and these are my last two ones for you, then I'm done. We need to have an attitude and mindset change in our youth and in our leaders, coming from the elders. We must promote self-pride, respect, and recognition of history, heritage, arts, craft, and culture. No one will do it for us if we don't do it for ourselves. Increase our self-esteem as Africans, our self-confidence and self-awareness and self-love. I don't have to be white to be a somebody. Climb the ladder versus owning the ladder. Own the ladder, that's self-employment. Don't have to work for Mr. So-and-so. Have a national dialogue on unemployment, its consequences, the reasons why it's there, and the ways to address it. Promote, recognize, and value the entrepreneurial spirit of innovation across all sectors of development in Namibia, Africa, based on our heritage, culture, arts, and spirituality. Understanding and accepting that we have a problem is the first step as an opportunity. Understanding that knowing is not understanding is the second step. Understanding that we need to assist each other is the third step. Let us therefore explore our comparative advantages in the following sector: the social, culture, arts, heritage, the environment, natural resources, the economic, and science technology. There is hope. Own your businesses. Do not work for others. Work for yourself. Finally, I hope that this project, this transformation of ourselves, our continent, and our people back to ourselves can assist us in our vision of building a society that responds to the true African values of Ubuntu. I am, because of you, the social cohesion as Africans, the family as a collective, friendship, mentoring, and caring for one another. Sensenina. Sensenina.
My question is, Doctor, as you are aware, we have signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and we are busy rectifying it. The President is saying it will not be rectified until such time we are in agreement. As an individual that knows tourism, my question is the following. 90% of what comes in, being goods or services within Namibia, under that agreement, must not be tariffed. And one of the sectors that it's focused on is the tourism sector. So the question is, must we protect the tourism sector under the 10% that we are supposed to protect under the agreement or not? If you say we must not protect the tourism sector, why? If you're saying we must protect it, why? Thank you.
You said something about the artist is a spokesperson of a culture, and I agree with that. I wanted to ask, what is the role of copyrights and intellectual property in a world where creativity is a collective process? And because I know our leaders are signing all these intellectual property agreements, international agreements, and all that.
A very inciting presentation. I think perhaps the question that I want to pose to you, really the world is becoming a global society. And I truly believe in Pan-Africanism, but I came to realize that we are one. So within this notion of being pride as African, something that I think we should be. But I also now realize that this is also one element that takes us back. So from that perspective of being part of global society, how do we define African and our own uniqueness in that global village? I thank you.
I'm just interested in some of the policies around cultural tourism that are coming out of the tourism Ministry of Tourism in Namibia.
Yeah, my question is a very exciting presentation you did there. And however, you omitted, I don't know whether by design or by default, to tell us about you being a director of tourism and that the kind of opportunities we as Namibian artists have that exist there in your department or directorate. For example, is there any chances to get funding for a cultural village or some museum somewhere where I want to show off artifacts, those were that existed between those epochs that you just nicely elaborated on?
Okay, I have to make a quick comment on that question because I think this is it's a regional summit. So there are other people from other countries. So maybe that's why the doc didn't try to zero in on opportunities just for the Namibians, but maybe as a way of sharing with us so that we learn from Namibia what are some of the opportunities they are creating, but not that very specific discussion on, yeah. But I'm sure the doc will handle it. Thank you.
My question is that actually it was hammered by the director, actually chopped my question. But yeah, as Namibian artists, how can we work together? We need to know exactly what tourism, what can we do as artists? How can we interact each other since now? Doctor, I have actually mentioned that we can be also independent. Without work, we can be, self-employed. So how can we work together?
I think originally the idea of this topic was for Sam to use his knowledge in tourism, because I think Namibia has always come across as a tourist space for landscapes and animals. And we have been talking over the years with the Ministry of Tourism about how we open it up to the human side. And I think it's something that can also work for the rest of SADC. And I know that in their policy they talk about cultural tourism, but as a creative, how do we come to be a part of that? And I think it still can relate to the SADC region. But there's also a strategy that the Ministry of Tourism has been running or pushing to support the social aspects of our society, which deals with arts and it deals also with sports. And I would have expected that would be elaborated on as well. So I have to admit that I agree that this is a question that needs to be answered. And we speak at it more in a general level and look at tourism, because I think most of SADC is quite a tourist attraction anyway. But how do we then use tourism, or we use the opportunity for creatives to make something out of the movement of tourists in our region. We talked about the festivals, for instance. When you look at the Haifa Festival, when you look at the bushfire and all these things, how do we come together to connect the dots and create more opportunities? Whether we create another music festival in Namibia that connects to the rest of them, or other arts festivals. And those are the things that I think we expected to hear about.
As someone who is categorized as a millennial, and right now as this generation, we want to be able to capture the essence of what we've seen in the past with our cultural initiatives and still bring it to the next generation that is going to be ridden with all kinds of technological advancement. And if I could give an example, when we had the passing of, it will be very quick, I promise, the passing of Honorable Tate Theo Ben-Gurab, the first thought that came to mind as creatives was, how did we miss an opportunity to capture the essence of this man and make him live out through the museums, through augmented reality, having him narrate a story about what happened in the past, and how did we miss this opportunity to gain all that information? So what I really want to ask is there a way for us to be more proactive as the next generation, to be more involved in getting the stories across so we don't lose the essence of the older stories and still bring them to the next generation? And how can we do that through technological advances, think Afrofuturism, everything involved in that? So yeah, thank you.
I want to start with the question about opportunities in the tourism sector. When I was asked to do that, I decided not to do so. And there's one good reason for it. The arts sector You are so far removed from reality. What the lady just said there is very important. Be relevant. The answers are in the presentation, but your mindset is preventing you from seeing what I've given you. They are all in there. And next to that, for the Namibians, we have gone across the country to the grassroots for 5 years, developing a national tourism growth strategy. Artists were not there. Despite the fact that we will announce last year for World Tourism Day, we even took our money and organized an event at the theater there for artists to come and do what we are doing here and discuss among yourselves how can you be relevant to the tourism sector. You didn't come. I sent out a survey to all Namibian artists. I got all your emails. I had 81 responses. We only have 81 artists in Namibia. In those responses, I saw that there was not one from research. You all see yourself as artists, but do not see yourself that you are more than an artist. You are part of a society. You are a game changer. I cannot give you the fish. I must teach you how to fish. You want me to feed you? I will not feed you. Then the colleague on the papers that were signed. For a large part of my life, I worked in the UN as an African chief negotiator. I left that world because we signed a lot of papers that meant nothing for our countries. Our countries don't eat papers. Our people don't eat paper. We sign treaty upon treaty, agreement upon agreement, and we don't see anything because you guys don't come to the table and translate those things into meaningful action on the ground. It's you who can make the change. About copyrights, there is one big problem. And that's why I went back to the past to come here. Understand that as an African, you are different from a European. Who made those rules of patent rights and copyrights? They were not made for you. And they will not protect you. So therefore, you as an African must come up with what they call in legal terms sui generis systems. A new law in its own right, since there is no law that protects you as an African. So you can keep on looking at copyrights and patents and those things. They are not for you. I spent a large time with WIPO and those guys, and I've walked away. Think about something that works for you. And about the policy framework, we have a national policy of tourism, 2008. It has the following: the Ministry of Environment, Tourism and Culture will aggressively promote cultural tourism. And we will aggressively work with anyone who is interested in culture, history, arts, and heritage. It also says that we will try to minimize the inappropriate exploitation of culture. And some of our artists are the very culprits of inappropriately exploiting our culture. You cannot wear my traditional outfit and yet you are showing your body in an inappropriate way. Because then the kids that are your fans will think that that's the way to do it. And with that, you are damaging the next generation. So think about what you are doing. Is it relevant to my grandmother, to my grandparents? I use this example. I went to a show with my daughter, dancing. And one of the young men in that show touches his crotch. My daughter looks at me like, you must know that there are others out there that are looking at you. You are the spokesman of our society and our culture. Are you or are you not? And perhaps in terms of Pan-Africanism, I would say we are not one. Yes, we are one as humans, but we have a problem within Africa. We are two, because our languages has excluded others from development. In the cities, we use English. My grandfather does not understand English. My ancestors do not understand English. Those in the rural areas don't understand English. So they are excluded from development. And no one should be left behind. Therefore, perhaps, if you want to talk about true Pan-Africanism, then our governments must bring back our indigenous languages at par with the Western languages. Our customary law systems must come back at par, because we are even being treated under foreign laws in our own continent. Roman Dutch law is not my law. So perhaps it's time for us to think about ministries of history, heritage, arts, culture, tourism, and creative industries under one roof. As long as they are separated, we will not make it. And concrete products, film tourism, but not films for consumption outside. When are we going to see many more cartoons using our languages, our people, our things? Adventure tourism. When are we going to bring our adventures there? Sports tourism. When am I going to see Okandeka? When I'm going to see our traditional sports featured? It's you who can do it. What about medicinal tourism? Why must I go for a Swedish massage in Windhoek when I know that my own people have their own indigenous healing massage? When are you going to start doing that? So there is much more. And again, it is the mindset that you have that must change for you to recognize, after all, you are an African.
Thank you, Doc, for that. So we conclude the proceedings.